Sandra was an orphan, yet her beauty was so remarkable that it seemed to glow from within. Her striking looks were the first thing everyone noticed when they saw her. She was wealthy beyond measure. But despite all the luxuries she could afford, Sandra remained single. She didn't believe that any man could be worthy of her. In front of her mirror, she would often gaze at her reflection, admiring how perfect she was. She would speak to herself saying, "No man can afford me. I am too beautiful for any man to own." Her arrogance was unmatched. She would walk around with her head high, believing that no one could ever truly understand her or see her as anything other than a beautiful woman. The way she spoke to men was harsh and dismissive. Every time a man tried to approach her, she would look at him as though he were beneath her. Her words were sharp and her tone cutting. People would wonder what had caused her to be so rude. But because she was so rich and stunning, no one dared question her. Sandra wasn't only arrogant towards men. She treated women, older women, and even elderly men with the same level of disdain. If anyone dared to speak to her or correct her, she would quickly put them in their place. She was known for her sharp tongue, and no one could ever get the better of her in a conversation. In the marketplace, Sandra would treat everyone with the same cruelty. She would insult the vendors, calling them poor and saying that their ragged clothes showed how deep poverty had eaten into their lives. She would laugh at them, telling them they looked malnourished, all while holding herself to a standard she believed no one could reach. But what was it that made Sandra so cruel? Was it her beauty and wealth? Or was there something deeper that had shaped her into the person she had become? Though Sandra had everything she wanted, she had never truly known love. She had lost her parents at a young age, and the pain of growing up without them had left a wound that never healed. Perhaps deep inside, she feared vulnerability. Perhaps she believed that if she allowed herself to be close to anyone, they would only use her for her money and looks. Her bitterness grew with every passing year, and it showed in the way she treated those around her. Sandra's world was one of gold and riches, but it was also one of loneliness and isolation. People admired her beauty, but feared her personality. She had built walls so high that no one could get close, not even those who might have wanted to be a friend or lover. But what if one day, someone would break through those walls? What if Sandra was wrong about the world and the people in it? Would she ever find the love she had denied herself for so long? For now, Sandra remained in her world of wealth and beauty, thinking herself untouchable. But little did she know, the future had its own plans for her. One day, as Sandra was walking down the road, she noticed an elderly woman struggling with a heavy load of firewood. The old woman, with her frail body and tired eyes, called out to Sandra, asking for help. "Excuse me, young lady, could you please help me carry some of my firewood?" she pleaded in a soft, shaky voice. Sandra, who was always in a hurry and never had time for anyone, turned sharply to face the woman. Her eyes narrowed, and a smirk appeared on her face. The thought of helping someone, especially an older woman, was beneath her. Instead of offering a kind word, Sandra's mouth unleashed a string of cruel insults. "You think I should help you? Look at you." Sandra sneered, her voice dripping with arrogance. "You look so poor, it's embarrassing. I can see it in your face. You've hit menopause, haven't you? You're too old now to even have children. No wonder you're out here begging for someone to carry your firewood. You must have no family to help you." The old woman was taken aback, her eyes wide with shock. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Sandra's words felt like a slap to her face, and for a moment, she was speechless. She had never experienced such cruelty from anyone, especially not from a young woman. "Please, my daughter, what have I done to deserve this?" the old woman asked, her voice trembling with hurt. "I have never done anything wrong to you. Why are you insulting me like this? I only asked for a little help." Sandra, however, wasn't interested in hearing any explanation. She continued to stand there, her arms crossed, her face twisted in disgust. "Next time you try to stop me, old hag," she said coldly, "I won't just insult you, I'll beat you. I've had enough of people like you trying to take advantage of me." The old woman stood there, stunned. She had never expected such cruelty. Her heart sank as she watched Sandra walk away without a second glance, leaving her standing alone by the side of the road. The firewood she had struggled with now felt heavier than ever. Not because of its weight, but because of the pain in her heart. Sandra walked off, her footsteps echoing in the silence of the street, but inside, something began to stir. For the first time in a long while, she paused. She had been so caught up in her own arrogance and pride that she hadn't even noticed the hurt she had caused the old woman. The elderly woman stood motionless, her eyes filled with sadness. She didn't understand why Sandra had been so cruel to her. She had only asked for a small favor, something that anyone with a kind heart would have done. Yet, Sandra had treated her as if she were less than human. As Sandra continued her walk, the echoes of her harsh words began to linger in her mind. She had said those things without thinking, without realizing the impact of her words. But there was no turning back now. The damage was done. The old woman, after standing still for a while, slowly turned and began to walk away. She wasn't sure where she was going, but as she walked, her mind was consumed with thoughts of Sandra. Why had Sandra treated her like that? What had happened to her to make her so bitter and hateful? The old woman didn't know the answer, but she couldn't help but feel pity for Sandra. In the days that followed, Sandra would continue her life as usual, walking with her head held high and her arrogance as strong as ever. But deep inside, something had changed. The old woman's words, even though they were soft and full of pain, echoed in Sandra's mind. She began to question herself for the first time, wondering if she had been too harsh, too quick to judge. Would Sandra continue down her lonely, arrogant path, or would the encounter with the old woman cause her to rethink her ways? Time would tell, but one thing was certain. The day she had crossed paths with the old woman had planted a seed of doubt in her heart, and seeds, when nurtured, have a way of growing into something far more powerful. The old woman, after standing still for a long time, finally picked up her firewood and walked home, her heart heavy with sorrow. The cruel words Sandra had spoken replayed in her mind like a painful echo. Never in her life had she been insulted so deeply, especially by someone so young. When she reached her small, worn-out hut, she set the firewood aside and walked straight to her altar. The flickering flames of the oil lamp cast shadows across the room as she knelt before the shrine. Her eyes filled with unshed tears. With a voice that trembled, with both pain and anger, she spoke. "O great spirits of the land, you have seen my pain. You have heard the cruel words that girl threw at me like stones. She mocked my age, my poverty, my barrenness. She insulted me, an old woman, without fear or respect. Let justice be served. Since she mocked my body, may her own body betray her. As she walks home, let her menstrual flow begin and never stop. Let it turn into a river, a curse no man or woman can reverse, and the day the blood dries up, let her life dry up with it." She clapped her hands 3 times and blew out the oil lamp. A strong wind rushed through the hut, as if the spirits had heard her cry. The old woman sighed deeply, feeling the weight of the moment. Then, she sat down in silence, waiting. Sandra's nightmare begins. Sandra was walking home, her heels clicking confidently against the dusty road. She was still smiling to herself, pleased with how she had humiliated the old woman. But suddenly she felt something strange. A sharp pain twisted in her stomach, and then warmth. An unsettling, unnatural warmth between her legs. Sandra frowned and paused. When she looked down, her heart nearly stopped. Blood. Her menstrual blood was flowing, but not in the normal way. It was rushing down her legs, pooling on the ground like spilled water. Panic gripped her chest as she stepped back, but the more she moved, the heavier it flowed. Within moments, the dust beneath her feet turned into mud, soaked in deep red. Sandra's breath came in quick gasps. "What is happening to me?" she whispered, her voice shaking. She tried to run, but the blood only gushed faster, spreading like a small stream. With each step, the flow increased, spreading out onto the road, creating a path of red behind her. She clutched her stomach, fear clawing at her throat. By the time she reached the center of the village, her body refused to move. She was stuck in one place, unable to take another step as the blood poured from her uncontrollably. It did not stop. It did not slow. It kept flowing, faster and heavier, forming a wide river beneath her feet. The villagers began to gather. Women gasped, their hands flying to their mouths. The men stood frozen in place, their eyes wide with horror. Even the children sensed something unnatural was happening and clung to their mothers in fear. Whispers filled the air. Is this a punishment from the gods? What kind of sorcery is this? How can a woman bleed like this and still stand? Sandra looked around, tears streaming down her face. She tried to move, to run, but it was impossible. The river of blood surrounded her, stretching across the ground, staining the earth. Her breath came in ragged sobs. "Somebody help me," she cried, but no one stepped forward. No one dared. Some villagers murmured prayers, others simply stared in silent terror. They had never seen such a thing before. As the blood continued to flow, Sandra suddenly remembered the old woman. No, it can't be, she thought. That wretched old woman must have done something to me. Her mind raced, but deep down she knew the truth. This was no ordinary bleeding. This was a curse. And then a new fear gripped her. The curse had said that the day the blood dried up, she would die. Sandra's arrogant confidence crumbled into raw terror. She had mocked an old woman, and now she was trapped in a nightmare she could not escape. The question remained, was there any way to break the curse, or was this the beginning of the end for Sandra? The villagers watched in silence, waiting to see what would happen next. As Sandra stood frozen in the middle of the village, trapped in a river of her own menstrual blood, the people around her grew more fearful. Some whispered that she was cursed by the gods, while others believed it was witchcraft. No one dared to go near her, afraid that whatever had befallen her might spread to them. The elders of the village knew that this was no ordinary sickness. Something powerful was at work. After much discussion, they decided to seek help from the only person who could give them answers, the mysterious witch, an old witch who lived deep in the forest. A group of elders set out at dawn, walking cautiously through the thick forest. The path was narrow, surrounded by towering trees and eerie silence. After several hours, they arrived at the hut of an old witch, the feared and respected witch. The hut was small, covered in vines, with smoke curling from a hole in the roof. The elders hesitated, but one of them stepped forward and knocked. A hoarse voice answered from inside, "Enter." Inside, the hut smelled of herbs and burning incense. An old woman with piercing eyes and long gray hair sat by a fire, stirring a black pot. She looked up at the elders with a knowing smile. "I know why you have come," she said before they could speak. "You seek to free the young woman from her suffering." The elders nodded. The witch placed her hands on the fire, as if feeling the energy of the flames. After a long silence, she spoke. "The curse was placed by a woman who has suffered greatly. The spirits have heard her cry. Only she has the power to lift the curse." The elders exchanged worried glances. If only the old woman who cursed Sandra could undo it, then they had no choice but to go and beg for her mercy. The elders begged for mercy. Without wasting time, the elders rushed back to the village and went straight to the old woman's hut. She was sitting outside, staring at the sky as if lost in deep thought. When she saw the elders approach, she already knew why they had come. Before they could speak, she sighed and said, "Sandra mocked me, humiliated me, and spat insults that cut deep into my soul. Tell me, elders, why should I lift this curse?" One of the elders stepped forward. "We understand your pain, and no one blames you for your anger. But a life is at stake. A lesson has been taught, and Sandra has suffered enough. If you can find it in your heart to forgive her, you will not only save her, but also show the greatness of your spirit." The old woman was silent for a long time. Then she nodded and said, "Sandra must first make a promise. Not with her lips, but with her heart. She must swear before the spirits that she will never mock or insult anyone again. She must live with kindness and humility. If she ever breaks this promise, may the curse return, and this time, may it take her life." The elders agreed and hurried back to Sandra, who was still standing in the pool of blood, trembling and weak. Sandra's promise. When Sandra saw the elders return, she looked at them with pleading eyes. "Please help me," she sobbed. "I will do anything to make this stop." The elders told her what the old woman had said. Sandra, who had been proud and arrogant all her life, now felt truly broken. She realized how much pain she had caused others. With tears streaming down her face, she fell to her knees and raised her hands to the sky. "I swear, from the deepest part of my heart, that I will never mock, insult, or look down on anyone again." I will live humbly and treat people with kindness. If I ever break this promise, may this curse return and take my life." The moment she finished speaking, something miraculous happened. The blood that had flowed endlessly suddenly stopped. The river of red disappeared into the ground as if it had never been there. Sandra felt her strength return, and when she touched her body, she was normal again. The villagers gasped in amazement. The curse had been broken. Sandra, overwhelmed with relief and gratitude, wasted no time. She ran straight to the old woman's hut and fell at her feet, sobbing. "Please forgive me," she cried. "I was blinded by pride and arrogance. I have learned my lesson, and I am truly sorry." The old woman looked down at her, her face calm and wise. Then she placed a gentle hand on Sandra's head and said, "Go, my child, mock no more." From that day on, Sandra changed completely. She became a kind and loving woman, helping the poor and respecting everyone, young and old. She never insulted anyone again, and she treated even the lowest person with the highest respect. Her beauty, once her source of pride, became a blessing she used to bring joy to others. The villagers, who once feared and despised her, now admired and loved her for her humility and kindness. Moral lessons 1. Pride leads to downfall. No matter how rich, beautiful, or powerful we are, arrogance can destroy us. 2. Respect for elders and others. Always treat people with kindness, especially the elderly, for their wisdom and experience are priceless. 3. Words have power. The way we speak to people can either heal or hurt. Be careful with your words. 4. True change comes from the heart. Sandra's curse was only lifted when she sincerely chose to change, teaching us that real transformation starts from within. 5. Forgiveness heals all wounds. The old woman had the power to hold on to anger, but she chose to forgive, and through her forgiveness she saved Sandra's life. Thank you, message. Thank you, my dear viewers, for following this story to the very end. I hope you have learned something valuable from Sandra's journey. Let us all strive to be kind, respectful, and humble in our lives. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. More amazing folktales and lessons are coming your way. Stay tuned, and remember, be good to people, and goodness will follow you. See you in the next story.